Hey guys, it's Syama here, CEO of Scaling Retail, and it's Casual Friday. I guess it's almost casual every day these days. So this week we are coming back with our interviews on Fridays, which is very exciting. So we're going to be having a conversation with a brand owner. Hey there, nice to see everybody. And in these conversations, guys, the whole point is to be able to kind of get a new perspective, give brands the opportunity to get their questions answered and ultimately be able to make some impact into their businesses. So what's really exciting, guys, is during this crazy time in the world, everyone's still chugging along, and I'm grateful for everyone continuing to, hey, from Berkeley, amazing. I'm over here in Marin County right now, which is pretty exciting. I love it over here. It's beautiful. So close by. Hello, neighbor. So the purpose of these one-on-ones is really for us to be able to shed some insight and help. Obviously everyone's working on their businesses. It is not something that is, it's not easy. And so today we are going to be working with Tamara Newson from Tamu Inc. And we're going to bring her on. We'll do a little bit of a one-on-one sesh. We'll see what's going on in her world. And hopefully, guys, we'll walk out of here with some, we'll walk out of here with some really great information. Awesome. All right. So let me see if I can grab you. Let's see here. Go live. Tomorrow I'm going to come find you. Let's see here. It says you are unable to join. And I don't know why. So Tamara, if you could please maybe sign out of your, click out of your Instagram, come back, and then maybe request to be joined into the video. I can go ahead and add you in automatically, I think, and it should be pretty easy. But as we're kind of waiting for Tamara, in order to get her on here, I would love for us to just kind of have a brief conversation on what's happening in the industry. You guys may have been hearing the news. A lot of different businesses are going through major restructuring. What I think is fascinating now is we're starting to see from a government standpoint, what's going to happen with unemployment. There might be some new, hey Sonia. We might actually end up seeing another round of some fiscal support when it comes to unemployment, which I think is going to be really important. And when we're looking at kind of the future, one of our clients right now who is running a drop shipment business, she's right now, it's July, and she's getting ready for sales for bringing on new merchandise for the fall. So even though, guys, you're probably wondering how your businesses can be surviving during this time, I would actually encourage you to take a look at what inventory you have on hand right now and how you actually might be able to find some opportunities through drop shipment. Thank you. It's nice to get compliments on my hair, guys. During these quarantine time periods, it's rough styling, right? But this could be a good opportunity for you guys to get your products on some drop shipment platforms. And so what does that look like? Well, basically, if you have carryover, if you have stuff that you need some distribution on, maybe you weren't able to get the right sales, then this is a good opportunity to see about additional distribution. All right, Tamara, looks like you might be ready for me. Let's go. Crossing my fingers, not holding my breath. I learned not to do that a long time ago. Tamara, are you there?
I'm here. Sorry, Syama.
That's all right.
All right, let me get out of this. Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. How's your
Okay. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's
That's
I feel
good.
like it's the summer now. I think we all thought we would be out of this COVID stuff a long time ago. So
Yeah.
a little bit's like, holy shit, like what are we what are we doing?
I know. Who knows? We're just taking it by the wind, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you found during this time period, like how has your creativity shifted and changed over these last few months?
I think for me, I have found that I'm more bold with it.
Mm,
So in my email, like I was saying, I've been trying out just different images.
mm-hmm.
And so I'm just letting myself just go. Been using paint. I've gone back to the basics using colored pencils.
Wow.
So I just let myself go. And if I come up with a design that I don't like, normally I would toss it, but I keep them. Now I find myself keeping more of
Mm.
the things that I don't like so I can challenge myself to, just take what I have and see if I can
Yeah.
develop it more instead of just moving on to the next thing. Because I think sometimes that's easier to
Yeah.
do rather than taking what you have and just trying to develop it.
Yeah, it's also like when you're little and you're like, oh, I really hate okra. And then you look back and you're like, oh,
Or Brussels sprouts.
yeah, like if I reworked it in this other way, then it would
Yeah,
be better. And wait a second, maybe I like it. So I love that. I think
yeah.
I think that creative journey is important to document. And I also think that like your base, right? Like the people who are your biggest fans, also important for them to know that like it's an artistic platform that you are developing.
Hmm.
It's pretty fucking
Hmm.
cool. So let's talk about business. I have your website up. Let's talk about the strategies and the things that you are um, implementing right now and some of your biggest questions. This time is really all for you. So you lay it on me and I promise to do the best that I can.
Okay. Well, I've scrapped everything. I started off with wanting to, well, let me take that back. I really wanted to, at the beginning, I wanted to do luxury. I wanted to just make it very, not necessarily custom, but just more specialized. I knew I didn't want to do mass market. And I really wanted to put my designs into the clothing. So I tested out, making my own fabric or coming up with the designs and images for my own fabric. But it wasn't moving as fast. No, I'm not going to say fast because I know this stuff takes time, but I guess I let myself get intimidated with the luxury market in general. So I moved over into doing something a little bit more simple, air quotes, and I moved everything online because that's what everybody was doing. And I hated all of it. I hated it, hated it, hated it. So it's not a surprise that I didn't sell the way that I wanted to. And so I just thought, you know what, I don't like any of this. So I'm going to go back to my original and what I wanted. And that was to be more customized, more original,
Mm.
get back into luxury pricing like I wanted. And so this is where I'm at. And so I don't know if I should start with luxury boutiques trying to sell one-off pieces that way,
Mm-hmm.
or
I see.
I really don't want to take the online route because I love styling people. I love being in
Mm-hmm.
front of people. I love, getting people just to change their style or put
Sure.
them in something that they're not used to. I love that part of it. So uh, I don't know where to go
Got it.
from here.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about physical space. And,
Okay.
when you're thinking about physical space, do you imagine having your own brick and mortar? Or when you talk about physical space, is it really selling wholesale?
What I would love is to have my own brick and
Mm.
mortar space.
Hmm. And what I think is really exciting for you and for really anyone out there who wants to have their own brick and mortar is we happen to be embarking on a time period where rental prices of space is going to be
Mm.
dramatically declining, um, over the next like 6 to 9 months, at least until there's some sort of, cure all or fix. Would you consider having a brick and mortar space? Let me ask you another question. Where do you live right now? What city are you in?
I'm in Tampa.
Okay.
Tampa.
Would you want to have a brick and mortar space in your city?
I would love to have one downtown Tampa.
So, what's interesting, and we'll have to talk a little bit about finances and budgeting and stuff like that, but you know, it may be possible at some point, I'm just going to put this out there, that you could have a small storefront that was also your office and your design studio, and kind of where you ran the business out of, where the front of house was almost like a smaller styling space, kind of boutique, and then your back of house was really your office and your design studio and all of that. And even if you went in on a space with another designer, and you guys were able to cover the cost of the space almost as if it was an office, like a storefront office space, right? Then you're kind of looking at it from the perspective of, you need a place to work now anyways, right? I see you're working
Yes.
space, so you need a space to work. But imagine if that space was both your front of house and back of house in one location. And that might be an interesting thing to consider, especially given that, you're not opening up a retail store where you're going to carry a bunch of brands. You would likely be carrying your own stuff and maybe another designer, and kind of splitting the cost. And I imagine that in the next, even though now we've been hearing that there's, Pfizer got, $2 billion to go come up with a vaccine, that shit still needs to be like tested. We're still kind of like a long way out. So as far as finding like I would say in the next 6 months, it could be amazing to see a small storefront that was also an office space that you were able to negotiate maybe a really great 2-year lease on, knowing that you would probably be using it more as like a showroom by appointment, right?
Yes.
Type of thing. So that is like, very much in alignment with social distancing and all of the things that we have to do. It's funny how luxury kind of is very socially distant, if you will, in that kind of customer service way. But yeah, that could be really cool to see if the economics of it would make sense for you, like in terms of the space and all of that. But I struggle with forcing anyone to build an e-commerce platform, because it is very expensive and noisy. So if your heart is not in selling online, there are limitations to that, of course. But if your heart is not in that, and you're a company of one, right? Or are there more people in your business, or are you kind of
just me?
Yeah. So
for right now.
Yeah. So if you're a company of one, then following your intuition is kind of your best CEO hat, right? So if you're saying e-commerce is not an avenue or a channel that you want to explore, there are drawbacks to that, mostly because, there's exposure to a wider market, when you sell online. But also the cost for doing business online is very expensive right now, digital advertising and all that stuff. But that's something, anyway, I'll let you continue. But that is like, I don't know. If your heart is in a space, I definitely see that there are ways for you to do that could ultimately help your business, and also really help satisfy the creative vision behind what you're doing.
Okay. Do you think, so I've been writing down what you said. And so because I'm not considering e-commerce, how would I scale?
So you're going to have, well, it depends. If you sell purely wholesale and through your boutique, then you can scale very nicely through other retail stores. So the way you look at the way that unit economics work is basically you need more distribution points and you need volume, right? So with e-com, you have one distribution point, but you have the potential to have lots of volume, right? Because you can basically the whole world can access your website, right? So you can do the unit economics in that way. With wholesale, you have multiple distribution points, right? And you have smaller volume generally, right? Across multiple distribution points. And that's another way to scale the business. The third way to scale the business, and this is the more labor intensive one, would be like opening up a bunch of brick and mortar stores all over the country and kind of creating your own ecosystem, right? So kind of investing in the infrastructure and putting it through that way. I think that to me is the more expensive way to do it. You know, I don't know if I would suggest doing that. That seems a bit risky right now. But if you go through the standpoint of your own brick and mortar or simply through wholesale, you can definitely scale your business that way. You don't need e-commerce to do that.
Is there, since I'm considering luxury, is there a different way that I would handle attracting people? So for example, with social media, we'll say Instagram. Is there a different way that I should handle marketing versus not being in a luxury market? Does that make sense? So does that make sense?
I think so. I think is the question, how do I market myself online as a luxury brand?
Yes. So with my website, I took down everything. So the only thing that's left there is my blog. And so I love writing is another thing I love to do. So I kept that there. So do you think that I need to change my content? Should my images be different?
Got it.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, you have a branding issue.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, you have a
Okay.
brand issue. Your website, it does not look luxury. The images are not luxury. The copy isn't luxury. And if your intention is to build a luxury brand, then you will need to, you will need to invest resources into building out what that looks like from a copywriting standpoint, photography standpoint, and you probably may not be the best person to do that for yourself. So that means that, like, you know, when you think about, this is actually a good way to think about it. You are where you are today because of how far you've been able to push yourself, which means that, like, you've been able to push yourself to a certain limit, right? We all kind of grow up against our edges. And at a certain point, you kind of need someone to extend the barrier here and say, okay, here's how you kind of go into the next phase. So the notion of doing your own branding or coming up with your own brand DNA, your own brand style guide, very difficult to do on your own, mostly because you're too close to it, right?
Yeah.
You lack perspective, right? It's like, you're in it too much. And I would say your biggest hang up right now would be to be able to separate yourself from what you've created and to even let someone else come in and say, all right, Tamara, here's how I think you should do it, you know, and being able to kind of creatively hand over that trust into an agency or a person to be able to guide you to that next step, right? Because that's going to require you emotionally vomiting everything you want this brand to be, and then having a company like ours basically say, here's how we think you can birth that business into the world. And that, I think, is important.
Okay. So should I just get rid of what I have now? I mean,
I
just
don't think there's much
going forward.
I
Okay.
say that I do have to say that I appreciate your blog, and I actually really resonate with your last post on releasing the struggle. I'm like,
Oh, I was like, which one was that? Okay.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, fuck the struggle. Like, I'm over it. I'm so over it. Like, I'm so over it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the blog here is really what your brand needs, right? Like, I would actually say that you would be better off with your writing content, almost creating a name for yourself as a guest blogger on a larger publication. So, like, if you want to refine your voice and, like, really creatively step into being a writer, I wouldn't do it on your business site. To take on a luxury brand feel, it's going to be no blog. It's going to be like high visual assets. It's going to be a strong call to action to get people to come into the store. It might be a 360 tour of the store inside so people get an idea of what your customer experience looks like. It's going to be a very different, it's going to be less is more in terms of like pages, but more in terms of higher quality content. So I would definitely suggest, I would definitely suggest that you kind of rethink the entire website. But the very first thing would be actually rethinking the brand, right? So like the brand name, the logo, the visual direction. Like again, you're up against a branding issue right now that you need to get out of if you want this to be successful.
Okay, got it. So first thing is rethink the brand.
The brand is
So
important.
this is
I
when,
also think if you're interested in brick and mortar, which honestly, like you could, depending on your budgets and financial planning, like it's highly possible. A lot of people do this like front of house, back of house thing with store. And if you could get yourself some really good rates right now on some beautiful, beautiful storefront stuff. But I think I would start to look at that as kind of like a 6 months down the road thing. And then simultaneously, it would take, like, for example, if Scaling Retail did your brand DNA and like brand naming and brand identity, that would take us about 6 months, you know? So you're kind of like parallel processing these things, right? It's not like, hey, let's do all this for the next 6 months and then focus the next 6 months on this. It's more about how do I parallel process certain activities in my business so I can kind of align everything to come together at a certain apex.
okay, got it. All right. And is email list, should I worry about that right now or just
You know,
focus on
no,
branding?
I would say if you're going to focus, if your business goal is a uh, brick and mortar storefront and you are wanting to build in-person appointments, yes, a list will be important, but only so as far as that they're regional to you. There's no point in and it's like if you're really building this very kind of intimate luxury boutique space, and you're not selling online, right? It's like it's gonna be very difficult for you to convert a customer who's in, Oregon, right? To be able to have that experience with you. So I would actually say focusing more on your local activities, right? So who is
Okay.
local to you? So yes, email addresses are important, but the right email addresses, right? It's like think about what you're converting them to do. I would think about maybe, you know, I don't know how far it would be far for people to travel where you are in Tampa, but like, in LA, if something is more than 30 minutes out, I probably wouldn't go, right? So like for me, it would be more like, okay, like if I had a store in Silver Lake or in West Hollywood, I would say, so a 30-minute drive in all of these directions is kind of the area that I want to be targeting, right? And then I would kind of focus on that area that I know people would be willing to come to me for.
Okay. Okay. And then should I even think about pricing right now?
That's kind of the next step, right? So first you need the branding, the brand DNA, the positioning, the customer, like we need to build the brand. Then the next step is to figure out what the hell are you selling and like what's the like brand value, like customer value. What are you selling? Coming out of your brand DNA and like having the conversations around assortment planning, you should be able to get a good understanding of where your prices need to be. But the way that branding works, right, is and this is how what we do is different than other companies. Like, another company might be like, oh, tell me what you want, and we'll go and build it. What we do is more like, hey, tell me what you think you want. We're going to go and do our own market research and like actually see what we think is possible in the world and what we think is a good position to be in. And then our recommendation is actually based on what we think is commercially viable. So like there's, and some clients don't like what they see and some really do, and it's like, but you kind of take that risk, right? And that means I'm willing to go from being a hobbyist to like a business owner. And when you're willing to switch from the hobbyist to the business owner, you're saying, I'm willing to take that risk and step outside of myself to say that what I'm creating is actually no longer for me, it's for my customer. When you're a hobbyist, everything you do is for you and you're kind of hoping people like it. The moment you put on that business owner hat, you're basically saying, I want to do something for customers. So like, how am I going to do that? So I would say, you have to be willing emotionally to be able to pivot. You have to want to be a business owner more than you want to be a designer. And I think that's the difference. If you want to just be a designer, then you can charge down your own path and like, be rogue and kind of test things out. If you want to be a business owner, then you kind of look at design through a different lens.
Okay. I'm ready to be.
Hell yes.
Yes. I'm in. You don't have to worry about that. Yeah, I'm there. I've been here for a long time.
Yeah. I think that is it's important to map it out. I would say our next step in our conversation would be, to have you sit down and kind of figure out what are some of my timelines that I'm up against, like where do I like, when do I want to be where, when do I want to launch this? When do I want to, where do I want to be and when? That's important. The other thing is to have a very realistic conversation about money. And most people don't want to have it because usually it means for most people, they can do less rather than do more. And what I think is really important to realize is knowing your financial limitations is super important because it gives us a framework and a sandbox to build from. So I'll give you like a good example. Like even someone who comes to me who's like, I can spend whatever I need. Well, we still need to define the sandbox. There's no, even if you said like, even if you had millions of dollars, I'd say great, but we need to define the sandbox so we know what we're building, right? And we can like focus on how to spend that money in the best way possible. And so a lot of it is, especially if, I have clients they've, paying for things from their day job, right? And it's like, well, if you're putting aside, let's say a few $1,000s a month, let's say you're putting aside $2,000 a month from your day job to fuel your business. Well, in my mind, that's not just $2,000 a month, that's $24,000 a year, right? And so we want to start looking at things from more of a macro, right? Like what's the sandbox and how do we define that? So, I would say our next conversation may not be on Instagram Live. It will probably be over the phone. But I would say, having a good sense of your timelines and having a good sense of, a comfortable budget and then being able to say to yourself, like, and these are things we can think about, but like, once you launch the damn thing, you have to operate it. Right?
Yeah.
So there's like a whole other set of resources you have to be thinking about. So financial components, I think, are super important.
Okay. Well, I'm not afraid to talk about money either.
Okay, good.
I like talking about money.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's sexy. I think most people don't realize like how important it is. But it's like not, it's really, it's like it's an important parameter. I also tell people your first business is normally not your last business. So kind of going into this, knowing that like you as a business owner or as a creative have multiple lifespans, I think is important as well. All right, darling.
I think that's freeing too.
Yeah, I'm gonna run. So awesome chatting with you and
thank you.
Hearing what you're up to. Let's circle up over email. And I love that you want to have a store. And I would say, like, you know, this weekend, if you could, go whet your appetite and drive around and just see, like, you know, what storefronts, what are things looking like? Not even to like rush into getting anything, but like, you know, you want a storefront, like, fuck yeah, like, let's go see what that's looking like. Start to add some real markers to your expansion.
Okay, I will do that.
Awesome. I'll talk to
I
you
will do
later.
that. Thank you so much. All right.
Welcome.
Bye.
All right, guys. So that is all for us on our one-on-one session. Super awesome, really fun. I love chatting with everybody. I think it's really cool to be able to hear what people want to do, what they want to create. I hope you guys also found that enjoyable. If you're interested in joining us next week, send us an email at hello@scalingretail.com. Would love to be able to take these conversations to the wider public and help people learn from where you're at and what you want to do. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.